In order to extract welfare reimbursement from poor families, the state of Georgia uses aggressive child support recovery tactics that send many indigent parents to jail. For families who have received welfare, a substantial amount of the child support collected does not go to the children, but directly to the state. The city of Adel is a town of a little over 5,000 people located in Cook County, Georgia, 4 hours south of Atlanta. The latest U.S. Census data finds that a staggering 24% of families in Adel live below the poverty line. In late 2009, the Southern Center for Human Rights discovered how poverty and poor economic climate was affecting parents trying to pay child support. Senior attorney Sarah Garrity.
We received a letter from a group of women at the jail, and the letter stated that people were being jailed indefinitely for their inability to pay child support. And when we went and visited the jail, we found that fully a third of the people who were incarcerated there were in fact there for inability to pay child support.
That 1/3 was comprised of 32 men and 13 women who contributed to the overcrowding of the jail and cost taxpayers $35 per person per day to house. Many of the parents incarcerated were too poor to afford an attorney. They were not provided an attorney by the court and were denied their right to a hearing that would determine whether their failure to pay child support was in fact willful.
When they locked me up, that was my first time ever getting locked up for child support. That was my first time ever being behind for child support. But he didn't show me no kind of leniency. He just went ahead and told me to make sure I have my toothbrush when I come to see him the next month. And I think that's wrong.
The next month, Mr. McBurrows was incarcerated. He would serve 91 days before his release. Katrina Brown's children were in the custody of her mother while Katrina escaped a drug addiction and an abusive marriage. She moved back in with her mother and children, got on her feet, and was then sued by the state for public benefits received by her children while in her mother's custody.
When I first got locked up, at that time, Judge Bleasley, it was like, it was no questions asked. It's just lock her up.
She was incarcerated multiple times for being too poor to pay. She was last imprisoned for 11.5 months. Because there was no visitation at the jail, her children were not allowed to see her. While in jail, child support payments continued to accrue with interest, driving already indigent parents further into debt. James Pickett was once heralded as Father of the Year, a consistent payer of child support and a great dad. After almost 4 years at Chaparral Boats, he was laid off. He then took a lower-wage job at the Adel Auto Wash. When the auto wash closed down, he was unable to find employment.
Took care of my kids always. I raised them and raised and treated them belong to me, you know. But now that I'm out of a job right now, it's, you know, it just makes it hard.
Working parents who are paying child support frequently lose over 60% of their paycheck to the state. If the court is not satisfied with the money they are able to submit, they can be found in contempt and jailed.
And when I got released, I got a job at McDonald's, and I really wasn't making enough to pay to meet child support requirements. I went from there to Piggly Wiggly, and I started working there, making $7.25 an hour. My first check at Piggly Wiggly, I brought home like $500. After child support took out, my check was like $163. And by the time I got to the house to give my mom or whatnot a bill, I don't have no money to do nothing to take care of my kids or to pay bills to meet my needs, my personal needs.
One time I went to court, I told them I had the money to pay on my child support, but I had rent, light, and my children need something to eat. And that one, they told me that wasn't a concern. Every time you go to the court, 9 out of 10, you're going to get locked up if you ain't got the money or a job.
The case most telling of the failures of the child support system is that of Mr. Frank Hatley.
Mr. Hatley had been jailed in Adel, Georgia for about 1.5 years because he failed to pay child support, even though Mr. Hatley does not, in fact, have any children.
In 2000, Judge Dane Perkins and the Assistant Attorney General presiding over child support hearings were given conclusive DNA evidence that Mr. Hatley was not the father of the child in question.
I was just labeled as a deadbeat dad, and they was going to get that money out of me regardless. even though they know that the DNA test had proved that wasn't my child. But by me not having to afford a real lawyer, I couldn't win because I couldn't afford a real lawyer to represent me. So they kept just abusing me and abusing me. You better pay this and you better pay that. And I didn't have no rights.
After he lost his job and became homeless, living out of his car, Mr. Hadley continued to pay with his unemployment check. Despite his efforts and the DNA evidence, Judge Perkins and the Assistant Attorney General re-incarcerated Mr. Hadley. This time he served 13 months.
One day seemed like 1,000 years. You just don't know when you're gonna get out. Don't know when you're going to court. Your life is a total mess when you locked up for child support. My life still messed up. Because you can't get back that time.
The Southern Center for Human Rights is seeking to end the use of debtors' prisons in Georgia. Please join in the fight for fairness and justice in Georgia's courts.